Good evening. Glad to have you back with us again, and we have another wonderful show. I think you'll agree after you see it. And my co-host, we have kind of a rotating group here of hosts and co-hosts. My
Depending on
co-host
whether
tonight,
or not they're stuck in snowbanks, you mean?
not really, but in point of fact, the reason we have this individual as our co-host, Sandy Williamson, who's generally in one of these seats, he decided to go out for Chinese food, except he went to China for Chinese food. And we keep waiting, you know, he's going to bring some back, but we'll see, we'll see. But in the meanwhile, we have Chris Pinto. Chris, how are you tonight?
I'm well. How are you?
Great, great. Chris will be doing the duties of introducing our guest, someone who's been on with us before and has an awful lot to say. He shook us up big time about 2 weeks ago, and I think tonight the shaking will continue. But in terms of shaking, Chris is going to be doing a little bit of an observation. So, Chris, take it away, guy.
Thank you. Usually I come out of the back room from behind the curtain when someone's stuck in a snowbank or someone's getting, you know, bionic put in their knees. And again, now I'm back again. So I'll try and have some fun.
Good.
And I'll try and not look so bad against my well-versed, professional, experienced host who has all the ladies fawning over him when he goes out in public.
80s and up, that's me.
So I do a lot of reading about politics, and once in a while I'll find something that someone's reporting on a national level that involves Worcester. So I like when people write stuff profoundly, and we're going to do a little editorial minute here, and I'm just going to steal this off of something I found on our website. And this website is naturalnews.com. So this guy, he calls himself the, what does he call himself? He calls himself the Health Ranger, Mike Adams from naturalnews.com. And he talks about some events that are going on here in Worcester. So if I could just read it to you, it's a very short piece, but I think it's very profound, the issues that he points out. Natural News. The city of Worcester, Massachusetts has one hell of a deal for you. Turn in your guns and you'll get a free flu shot in return. It's all part of the city's annual Goods for Guns buyback program, which sounds like an April Fool's joke, but it actually isn't. So here's how it works. You locate a firearm that might protect you from violent crime or even a runaway criminal government someday, and you bring it to the police department. Then they destroy your gun, and in return for this, they assault you with mercury-laced vaccines and call it even. Geez, sounds like a bargain if you're a brain-dead zombie. Me thinks guns bad, vaccines good, must destroy guns, take vaccine shots, watch TV, drink fluoride, government good. What I'm trying to figure out here is how stupid the local Massachusetts government officials must be to think that the residents will somehow figure that this exchange is a good deal. It's kind of like being offered something like, you give me all your money and I'll punch you in the face deal. Or, hand over that nice car you're driving and I'll shoot you in the stomach and we'll call it even. It deserves some consideration. No?
It certainly does.
So that's a profound thing that I figured we had to add that to the beginning of the show to maybe get some people around Worcester thinking. Is it a good deal or isn't it? But now, without further ado, let's get back to the man who stirred it up a couple of weeks ago.
Let's introduce
We have a returning guest, Mr. Jack Ellison, who really wowed us with his knowledge a couple of weeks ago. And he's returned. He is living in Framingham. He makes his living as a database guy. He's a tech guy like myself. But his real passion is following the radical Islam folks that are around the world and especially right here in our country. The return at speech that he's talking about today is called Civilization Jihad, Free Speech versus Anti-Blasphemy. So welcome back, Jack. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here. And
Jack, delighted to have you.
Thank you.
I remember the last time you were on, one of the things that I learned, that I should have known, is that this Muslim Brotherhood, which I thought was a fairly recent outpouring from this Arab Spring, this wealth of democracy that they're being blessed with, well, it seems that it wasn't exactly a brand spanking new concept. This dated back to 1928.
Correct, yep.
And from that point, that's where you jumped off and gave us just 28 and a half minutes of blood-curdling facts as to what's really going on out there. And I hope that some of the folks out there who saw that show have tuned into some of the websites that Jack alluded to. Perhaps at the end he can reiterate that, because it's an important thing to learn about. This is no abstraction. This is real. So, at any rate.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, the Muslim Brotherhood and what it means, we could relabel it and call it a worldwide Islamic movement, because it really doesn't own a particular address and capital city. Mm-hmm. It's really all around throughout the Mideast, throughout the world. Now, we're familiar with it, with the names of such as Al-Qaeda. If we followed Benghazi, we heard about Ansar al-Sharia. Mm-hmm. But in any case, the Muslim Brotherhood is the ideology, and it is literally wherever we have Muslims. Again, mm-hmm. as we said last week, we have 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, and the majority of them are peaceful, and they don't go and dedicate themselves to jihad, and they don't do violence. However, the percent that does is huge enough for us to seriously worry about.
And again, you use the word jihad, and just to define terms, because I think it's important to do that. Share with us again what the literal definition of jihad is,
right.
please.
Right. I'd like that to be understood. When we say jihad, what we're talking about, it's not personal struggle, as someone who's trying to whitewash Islam will tell you. It's not personal struggle. What jihad actually means, and I'll take it from direct from the source, The Reliance of the Traveler, a book that is the source of truth for the Quran. Again, to restate it, jihad means to war against non-Muslims, and is etymologically derived from the word mujahada, signifying warfare to establish the religion. Jihad. I have another factoid I'd like to toss in here, where we talk about jihad as spoken by Muhammad in the Quran. Here in one of the hadiths, I'll quote, Muhammad is saying to his followers, he said this, "I charge you with 5 things that Allah has charged me with: to assemble, to listen, to obey, to immigrate, and to wage jihad for the sake of Allah." The thing we're dealing with here in the country, which is rather hard to discern, is what we call civilization jihad. We covered the charter of the Muslim Brotherhood in America last time, mm-hmm. but I'll read it again. It's worth knowing. In a document discovered by the FBI, the master plan for the Muslim Brotherhood in North America states that the Brotherhood must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within, and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers, so that Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. When we
sort of sets the stage,
right.
doesn't it?
It does, and we are overly focused on the terrorist modality. We're not seeing what is really going on. We're not seeing what is really gaining yards on the 50, 60-yard line in the master game plan. Just today, I'm reading in the news that the administration, the Obama administration, thinks that they soon will see a tipping point, that they will soon have assuredly gotten rid of Al-Qaeda. Okay. It's a big distraction. It's a big diversion. This is like someone saying, watch my hand over here, but don't look at this hand. What's going on is civilization jihad, and it is obligatory on every Muslim to do that. Again, most don't, but they're not going to be considered, they'll be considered as apostates. So the thing for us to know is when we hear Muslims who tend to want to say what Islam really means, we need to be very astute to find out if they're telling us something that actually matches their book and their prophet.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it part of the tenet that it's okay to lie, okay to obfuscate the truth, for the greater good of Islam.
Right.
In other words, tell them what they want to hear, but we're still moving our program forward, regardless.
Right. It's understood that if you are answering a question or if you're communicating something, that it's okay to lie if it helps Muslims in general. If it directly has to do with the advancement of Islam, it's mandatory to say that which will help and not impede Islam. So whether that's understood, we have to match back to the source. So Muhammad actually said that if you lie to help the cause of Islam, it is not a sin. It's like saying, they'll say that there is no honor killing, no honor killings sanctioned in Islam. But if you read in the Quran, it will tell you that killing is permitted if it's someone who's been unfaithful to you, or if it's one of your kids, one of your children.
I should have brought it with me today. I didn't. There's a pretty fine book, and it's called Islam Unveiled. And I forget the name of the author. I read it about 4 or 5 years ago. And it exposes many of the quote-unquote truths and unmasks it. And it's pretty blood-curdling, to tell you the truth.
Well, it's very hard for Westerners to know, to have an affinity to receive what the Muslim ideology really is made of, because it is literally based on hate and intolerance. It's hard for Westerners to adopt that. When we hear that it's a religion, we don't easily put that picture in mind.
I'm sorry.
Sounds like some of the liberals I know.
I'm sure it must be.
Jack, one of the things that we're hearing on a repeated basis, and this is not necessarily consistent with where we're going with this, is how Christianity and Catholicism and so on and so forth is under mega attack this time of the year, Christmas time.
Right.
Okay. Yet, the 2012 Muslim Day Parade, share with us some information about that, please.
Oh, in New York?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, they really did show, they gave a good indication of what their face is really like. And they were really bravado about jihad and kind of fuzzy in memory on the details of what I heard, but I know that it made certain people look very bad. And there had been supporters of the parade, before the parade happened, and after the parade happened, they wanted to stay away from that. Politicians inside New York.
So they supported that this parade would take place, but while the parade was going on, they kept their distance.
And I wish I could be clear on what politician we're talking about here, but I know that the parade sort of let people see the intolerance that Islam really is about. And I'd like to make sure that we take up our track for tonight.
Please. Yeah.
That in Islam, as I mentioned last week, there is one freedom, and that's to accept Islam or not. So the agenda of what we're calling the worldwide Islamic movement of Muslim Brotherhood is to impose Sharia on every land that it can enter and gain a foothold in. That being the case, and us talking about civilization, jihad, the way we are, it may not be so clear how that's really advancing, because it takes root through gaining position of influence and controlling the message that people get to hear about what Islam is. By controlling the message, they keep people from knowing the real makeup of the religion of peace, as it's called. So right now we have a long ongoing attempt by the United Nations, and in particular the OIC within the United Nations, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. 56 Islamic nations plus Palestine, add that in, even though Palestine isn't a real country. Let's add that in. 57 Islamic member nations that are doing their level best, and they've been at this for about 8 or 9 years now, to criminalize any speech, any word, any action that criticizes or insults either Islam or its prophet or Allah or the Quran. So this is in the United Nations known as Resolution 1618. And our president, Mr. Obama, in 2009 co-sponsored this bill and signed on for it. Well, the member states are not stopping. They change the narrative a bit as they go. But what we are looking at is that the attempt by Islam to silence criticism of it in the country, for what purpose? So how can you impose Sharia on a country while it's still something you can debate, argue about? If you remove the ability to debate it, criticize it, or argue about it,
it's a done deal.
It's a shoe-in. It's a shoe-in.
Is that what they call the Istanbul process?
I think it is, yeah. The Istanbul process is one of the names for it. And let me read a couple of points on that. And a couple other things to know about it. One of the terms they're labeling it with is combating defamation of religions. But if you take a religion like Christianity, let's say Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, they undergo criticism, any particular day or night, and they don't lose their rights. They don't fold. They don't cave. But it's Islam that says it will not tolerate anyone criticizing it. And so, if the United Nations can get this to happen, let's see whether or not that's feasible. What would it take?
So basically, it comes down to the fact that it will be permissible to take an image of Jesus or Moses and place them in a jar of urine.
Yep.
But it will be criminalized if it's the Prophet Muhammad.
That's right. Yeah. And in Islam itself, the penalty for doing that is a certain death penalty. So blasphemy or criticizing Islam or the Prophet is.
And there are, I've heard this before, I don't know if it's true, are there parts of the United States where Sharia law has been adopted?
There are cases where certain courts in various states have judged a case according to Sharia law. And we have Governor Christie in New Jersey who just installed a Muslim judge in the state. So yeah, there are cases. I'm not up on how many there are, but it's one of the things that we're fighting against. And when we say creeping Sharia, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. It needs to come in quietly. Obviously, the Islamic countries can't defeat us militarily. But what they can do...
Not until sequestration.
Sequestration. Right. But,
sorry.
Right. Or unless we continue to give away our military, such as the current administration is doing.
Yes.
Weaken.
Well, we have an individual in the White House who, as I remember, is part of the Reverend Wright's congregation.
Right.
Yet the same individual, also known as Barack Obama, quoted in September of this year, not 5, 10, 15 years ago, when he was back in Kenya or Indonesia or the Philippines or God knows where all, direct quote, "The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam." Hello? Please explain that to me.
Right. This was his speech at the United Nations in September, and it followed upon the heels of the DNC committee and conference in North Carolina. So right after 9/11, after the events in Benghazi, as far as anyone can determine, the administration put top precedence on gaining as much mileage out of the false argument that the Benghazi massacre had been a response to us criticizing the Prophet.
A YouTube movie.
Yeah, a silly YouTube movie.
Yeah.
With people that don't really They're not professional actors.
And there was supposedly a protest, is what they said.
They said that's what it was. Even though Petraeus has testified that right away he knew it was Al-Qaeda or a related group. And even though he testified to that effect, he also testified to the effect that his printed statement had been revised.
There's an expression called a red herring, and that's exactly what that whole process was. They knew they had something on their hands that was embarrassing to them because Al-Qaeda was totally under control, blah, 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 blah. Guess what? So thank God for them that they found this thing that nobody had ever really seen. And, oh, this is what it's incited 1 billion people around the world.
Right, and it had a dual purpose. One, he wanted to show that he had already defeated Al-Qaeda. He didn't want the message that this attack was Al-Qaeda to come out. Mm-hmm. But two, he wanted to insinuate yet more into the standing that, into the decision that it is not okay to criticize Islam. If you criticize Islam, bad things happen.
But I don't think there's anyone sitting at this coffee table here that agrees for a moment that Al-Qaeda has been defeated. That's just a narrative that Barack Obama wants to play, and he was, intentionally doing that leading up to the election.
Exactly.
Because it would be, what's his name? The terrorist we just killed.
Bin Laden.
Yeah, Osama bin Laden's dead, and Barack Obama's the one who took care of that. So we should all rejoice because this Democrat administration can protect us from terrorists.
Well,
and his killing made Al-Qaeda just fall apart.
Well, don't you know? In fact, there's yet another purpose that the more we accentuate, the more we move focus to groups like Al-Qaeda, the more we move it away from the real process.
Indeed.
The Muslim Brotherhood.
Jack, we have about 5 minutes to go. Can you focus on Benghazi for the next few minutes?
Well, there's a lot of imprecise knowledge on that. A couple of things I can tell you that we know is that it wasn't so much a consulate as it was a CIA safe house, and there were players involved that were transferring Al-Qaeda captured weaponry from Libya, passing it up across land over Turkey into Syria, because the Arab Spring, the persona that are there trying to take down Assad, need this kind of weaponry. So a lot of that was in play. No one really knows how much of it was there or how much of it went where, but we do know that certain amounts of it have been tracked and captured that were en route to Syria. Mm-hmm. There's another thing. We don't know what role Turkey played in that, because the hour before the attack began, Ambassador Stevens was just meeting with the general consulate from Turkey, and the jihadis outside had been surrounding that place for about 6 hours. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew that something was going to go down, but they waited for the Turkish general consul to leave and before launching the attack. So we don't know what role Turkey played there, and I'm questioning. I'd like to know. I mean, it's a good question. We'd like to know why this is called the Istanbul process. Turkey is saying it wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire. I'd like to segue off to mentioning a couple of websites that people can look at.
Please do.
For information on this. I'd urge everyone to look at silentconquest.com. It's www.silentconquest.com. There's a new, extremely informative video there that you can watch online for free. It's made by the Center for Security Policy. I would like people to also know that we can look at shariathethreat.org. shariathethreat.org. Again, there's a lot of information coming from Center for Security Policy, but self-education is key in this battle space. Self-education is key. If you don't understand Islam, you won't understand events that are going down, and the spin we get on the spin we get from the mainstream media and from the administration is worthless. So I'd also like to mention Americans for Peace and Tolerance. This is a fantastic group organized by Charles Jacobs, and they made the movie called Losing Our Sons. And I would urge everyone who wants to understand a radicalization of Americans to see this movie, because it's a story of one young man that was killed, one young man that had converted to Islam and had trained with Al-Qaeda. So please, everybody, look at www.losingoursons.com. And, of course, Act for America. We're very engaged with the UN resolution issue 1618 and the attempt to get criticism of Islam criminalized. We're very engaged with that, and you can expect to see a lot more out of us over the coming year.
Well, Jack, there's just one more thing. We got to wrap up now, but I have a question.
Sure.
I remember seeing one of these websites, and they had video of, I think it was Deval Patrick, and you know the video I'm talking about?
I do, yep.
Receiving a $50,000 donation.
Oh, yeah.
So that we could educate our police better on being sensitive.
Exactly.
What is up with that?
What's up with that? That is a prime case where the Muslim Brotherhood has put people in place inside law enforcement, and they now have ownership of the message. They control the message, the narrative. They control how law enforcement engages with Muslim groups.
Now, do you think if I started my own religion that Mayor Menino would give me land worth millions of dollars so I could build my own church on it?
I expect he would, Chris.
Well, that's good. I know he's been sick lately, so maybe when he's feeling better, I'll hit him up for some land.
This is a topic I'd like us to come back to.
What I'd like to suggest just in closing is this. It's impossible to get your arms around this in one or two shows, and what we'd like to do is extend an invitation to you to come back periodically to let us know what is happening and you know, what the latest bad news is, or good news, perhaps.
Or good.
Folks, thanks again for joining us.
Chris,
I hope you found this to be interesting, and look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you Wednesdays at 4:30, Fridays at 5, Fridays at 8, Saturday night at 11, Sundays at 7.